What's going on, Dragons? Happy Friday, and welcome to episode 21 of the ErCast, your weekly Friday Night Magic pre-show. I'm your co-host, Cory, and this week there's been Cue the Thunderstorm, a murder.
Ah!
And Cole and I are here to unravel the case that is the murders of Karlov Manor and tell you who and what we suspect are the cards worth getting your hands on.
I'm happy to be here, Corey, and I am staying away from any room that has you and a candlestick in it because I am not going to end up like the victim of this set.
They call me Coronel Mustard. Thank you very much.
Golf clap.
But golf clap, yeah. It was a rough one. It was a rough one. I don't think we got there, but it was a rough one. But this week, you guys, hey, today is the day. Murders at Karlov Manor comes out, being billed as Wizards of the Coast's first top-down murder mystery whodunit set. So the whole set is set within the manor of Teysa Karlov. How are you feeling about this?
Yeah, I mean, so growing up, I loved playing Clue on the board game. I loved the Clue movie. So I had a lot of excitement kind of coming into this set. You know, there's a lot of like play on Clue themes, and I thought that there was a lot of potential here. I think there is a lot of potential here. I'm not coming into it with a negative, a negative mindset, but I think this is an interesting set for sure.
I like the way you backtracked. I think there definitely. I thought there would be. No, wait. There still is potential in this set. I'll tell you what there is a lot of in the set, and I think this is kind of where we can kick off the discussion. There is a lot of mechanics. So usually
Right.
when you see a new set like this, I mean, what two, maybe two, three max kind of new mechanics you see kicked in. This set has five, six easy, like just new mechanics, new twists on old mechanics. It's a lot, I think, kind of out of the gates for a new player. So let's run through all of those, and then of course, we got to do what we did last time. We got to check out the precons. We can check out the new cards, all that good stuff. But let's talk mechanics first and foremost. So this is a murder mystery set. So we got to start off. Obviously, it's going to be a big clue investigation set. So Cole, what do you think on that? I think 2023 was the year of the food. Does this mean 2024 is going to be the year of the clue?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it in the last episode that it's gone like treasure, food, and now we're seeing clue. Overall, artifacts have gotten massive boosts in the last like year or so or 2 years. But this set has, I mean, the biggest mechanic that you're going to see in a lot of these cards is an old mechanic. You know it, you love it. It's investigate. Its clues are everywhere. Clues are getting modified. You have clues that sacrifice, tap for one less mana. You have clues that create a lot larger effects than they used to, and investigate is going to be a really strong mechanic that is one of the few mechanics from the set that you will see in every future set coming forth. You're not going to see a lot of these other ones like the maybe cases or suspect, but investigating that's evergreen.
I agree. Now, I do have an issue with investigate, which is how come clues get a very straightforward keyword, which is investigate, but there's not like, hey, cook or I don't know, hoard or whatever treasure would be. Like it's clues get one, but everything else is just make food, make treasure.
I think that's a really insightful point. I think they should
Only points I
errata
make.
every card that has ever made treasures or gold tokens, and come up with something a little, like evade taxes or some fun keyword that gets the kids excited about making treasures.
Sure, it should just be called DuckTales, and it's just every time I DuckTales, I create another treasure token, and I have to have my character swim through it.
Dive into a pool of dockside extortionists.
That's my goal. But yeah, like you said, so investigate is for sure going to come back because we've been seeing investigate for the better part of let's say 10 years at this point. It's come out for quite a while for quite a few sets.
That's a little shocking to hear.
But let's talk about some of the new ones. So you brought up suspect. So you can't investigate a murder without having your suspects. So suspect, I think, is probably going to be the other big one. Not that you'll see it again, I feel like, but probably the other one that pops up the most on the cards, which is you suspect a creature, and the suspected creature gets menace and then cannot block. So if you're suspected, you get menace, you can't block, but you're, I guess, intimidating because you're a murder suspect. So therefore, you're just on the loose, on the prowl.
And as you know, in like just like in real life, murder suspects cannot block. Uh,
Yeah.
the other big part of this keyword is that or this like mechanic is that a lot of cards refer to suspected creatures. So once a card has been suspected, even though it gains menace and can't block, you're going to want some sort of like indicator on there to show that it is a suspected creature, because a lot of cards are going to care about oh, all suspected creatures have this effect happen to them, or so on and so forth.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very much like the ring tempts you in that sense. Like you need to know which one is the ring bearer out of your set. So yeah, you would want to identify it in some way. There are a lot of effects in this set that are suspected creatures goaded and stuff along those lines. Um Now the other kind of who done it aspect to this, obviously, is the kind of cloak and dagger, we'll call it, of cloak and disguise.
Ooh.
Which, I mean, that cloak and disguise, so I don't know how to describe it. It's too confusing for me. They're all variations of turn my stuff upside down and play with them, which anyone who's been in the game before would just call morph, essentially. Main difference is that some come with ward, some just are face down, some face down flip at different costs. I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah, I think they had a good thing going with Morph to begin with, and this just seems a bit excessive. It seems like we already have a hard enough time keeping track of board states that are flipped right side up. So now having so many different cards with so many different possible reasons that they're flipped upside down, I'm tired of it, man. I'm just stick it all under the Morph umbrella and call it a day, because I'm seeing that cloak gives it flips it face down as a 2/2 creature with ward 2. It can be turned up face up anytime for its mana cost if it's a creature card. But then disguising also gives ward 2. It's just I'm confused.
Yeah, so before we record this, I literally counted them up. So if we go down the list, so we've got Cloak and Disguise are our two new ones. You also have Morph. You also have Megamorph. You also have Manifest. So we're at like 5 different ways you could flip stuff face down. And then really the big variables on it are what you pay to flip them up. So for example, Morph is what, 2 colorless? Essentially, Megamorph has its own cost of an ability. Some of them come with ward, and you flip them face up for 2 colorless. Some come with ward, and you flip them face up for their own mana value. Manifest, you can theoretically manifest instants and sorceries, but you can only flip them up if they're creatures. So it's like its own like cluster of nonsense.
Yeah, I'm I'm gonna defenestrate this mechanic by throwing it out the window. Um, I do think that they're we're talking about a lot of the more complicated mechanics, but there were some that were pretty simple and straightforward. One that I think could have potential. It's basically a different version of Delve, but it's collecting evidence. This is like you typically a cost for an ability, or like maybe it's a ward cost. What some creatures have like ward collect evidence for, where basically you're going to exile cards from the graveyard equal to the number that comes after the word there. So collect evidence 4, you'd have to exile cards with total mana value 4 or greater from your graveyard. I think this is kind of cool because if you're able to control what's in your graveyard, you can, manipulate that number really easily, and collecting evidence can be super easy for you. But if you have a hard time filling your graveyard, or if you have a hard time, casting spells and, getting things to actually now collect evidence from, it kind of seems like a bit of a miss the mark there on that mechanic.
No, no, I definitely agree. Yeah, if you have a good graveyard or a good kind of graveyard piece, I like it from the standpoint of it is very similar to Delve. I could also see it working really well with like Descend decks that we saw from the last set with Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Because
Sure.
I could see some situation where I descended so many times, and then I either delve or I collect evidence to get some added bonus on top of it. The card you're talking about though, the I believe it's mono green, trample haste, and then it's got ward is collect evidence for. That seems like a fun card just from a graveyard kind of hate piece in green.
Yeah. Now, I will tell you, it's not trample; it's death touch. So I don't know if that changes your
Even better.
opinion. But he is a death touch hasted for 4/4 who's basically untargetable if you're playing a deck that doesn't have black or blue in it.
See, I love it already. So what you're telling me is I drop down a Bajuka Bog, I knock out somebody's graveyard, and then I just start swinging at them with my Death Toucher.
Yeah, and you just got to hit them 10 times each opponent, and you win the game in a quick 40 turns.
Yeah, but I think so far out of all these, I mean, Suspect and Collect Evidence seem like they might have some gameplay potential that I would enjoy seeing. The Cloak Disguise thing is sort of a non-starter for me. But there is another brand new card type we have as well in this set. Cases. So it's a brand
Oh,
new enchantment type. Um, I don't know how to describe it. It's sort of like it has chapters, but it's not really a saga per se. I guess it would be closer to like classes from the D&D sets where you have to do a certain like hoop to get to the next one. So the classes from the D&D sets you have to pay mana for. These ones you have to fulfill a like little side quest so to speak in order to solve the case.
and
So they come
activate
in with
the
some.
final ability of the enchantment.
Exactly. So they come in with a static ability when they first enter. They've got some qualifier in order to solve it, and then they have a second ability that kicks in after the fact. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts there?
yeah. So I mean, these are cute. It's a gimmick. I'm not to be. I feel like I sound like a bit of a buzzkill, but I like it. I mean, I like some of the cases. I think they're fun, like conditional enchantments that you have to, play a bit of a mini game to complete and get the like intended effect. Some of them are really interesting. I just am curious if this will be another battle, the card type that was so highly anticipated
Hey,
from
they're coming back.
Phyrexia. The Pinkertons, they're taking me. No, I'm like, I don't know if we're gonna be able to see cases in future sets. So I'm to me, this just seems like an enchantment with extra steps. I don't know if it needed an entirely different subclass. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but are the class enchantments, do those have like a subtype?
Yeah, don't they? I believe they're literally classes. But either way, I mean,
You
I
know what
kind of
they
agree
are?
with you, right? So I
I was
think
wrong.
the I think it is sort of a tie into the set theme because sagas you can put in essentially any set because it tells a story and every set is trying to tell a story through the cards as it is. So you can
Right.
always have sagas in essentially any set. Um cases I they kind of have to be only in a murder mystery kind of setting. Like it's very hard to see cases come back in another setting. Same for
Sure.
classes. Classes work very well with D&D or those kind of like role playing themes, but it's hard to see a class pop back up, in let's say Fallout or uh, you know, Under Junction or any of these upcoming sets.
Yeah, unless there's a class on like launching a spit into a spittoon from like 20 feet away, or
Yes, the Jace class.
yeah,
Um,
I like cases. I you know I'd want to go back on my previous word there. I feel like I spoke too soon because with the classes, I actually do use those in a lot of my decks. I enjoy them, and I enjoy the minigame aspect of it. So yeah, I do stand by that having more things to need to twiddle with is a little bit tedious. But as like
mhm.
a player that enjoys putting dice on stuff, and oh, this one is solved, so I'm going to indicate that by putting a Monopoly piece on it, or like yeah, I like that sort of thing. So I'm all in on cases. Sign me up.
I do like the mini game aspect to it. Like, don't get me wrong, because it feels very much like entering the dungeon or something like that. Where hey, whenever you do this, you activate that trigger to go deeper into the dungeon and delve around and explore.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like if it was a saga and they just said, hey, when you do this, you get to the next chapter of the saga instead of it triggering on your upkeep or on your draw step. I feel like I would enjoy it a little more, maybe because it's like, oh, I'm going through the case.
Well, my only other concern is that like a lot of enchantments or like anything that requires that upkeep to come around, like a saga, is like if I
Mm.
know what the effect of the saga is, I might destroy it before you even get the chance. I like to think that if you were a dogged enough detective that you could solve a case as soon as it was handed to you, I'd like to be able
Mm.
to make sure I get the benefit out of my enchantment without having to worry about.
I mean,
Um,
I'm
hmm.
I'm definitely not playing any of these unless I already have the win con or the solution like squared away, right? Like some of these are, hey, you have to have so many cards in your graveyard or so many lands in play. Like, trust me, that hurdle has been passed long before I tapped the mana to play this.
Right.
Only one I think maybe not would be the is it the case of the burning masks? Maybe the one that's mono red that has to do with you solve it by having three instances of damage getting dealt, but when it enters, it deals like two damage right off the bat. Maybe if I
Okay.
was in like a Modane, the Pyro Hammer kind of thing, maybe I would play that first. Go, well, there's one instance, and then lightning bolt shock. Ha ha ha! I've solved the case.
Right.
But I think the biggest hurdle for me in the cases is there's not enough of them. Like there's not enough good quality ones that I want to play.
Yeah, maybe as time goes on with like a lot of the testing, because there's some that are super applicable. Like the one that comes to mind is like the case of the suspected skeleton, or
Hmm.
there's you create a skeleton token that once it's killed, you are now able to tutor for a card. There's some fun, I think, very EDH playable cards in these within these cases, but I think it's going to just take a little bit of sifting through what's relevant and what's just mainly flavorful.
Yeah, I mean, like the suspecting skeleton thing is definitely a good aristocrats card in the sense of you have suddenly made fodder right away that I can sacrifice, solve the case, and then I tutor. So you're getting whatever benefits from sacking it off.
Uh-huh.
And then I also kind of like the case of the locked hothouse. The one that lets you play additional lands. That one seems it seems playable as well. But speaking of playable, we got some precons. So we did get four precons out of this set. We have the Blame Game, Deadly Disguise, Deep Clue C, which is just an A plus pun, by the way, A plus. And Revenant Recon. It's called Revenant because, of course, it has all the bears in it, right?
Right,
And it's
Leo
being helmed by
DiCaprio.
Leonardo DiCaprio himself.
Right, right.
um, so let's look at those real quick, and I think I'm curious what your take is on them because to me, there's like out of the four of them, there's two. that I'm like salivating over, and there's two where I'm like, never, never let these come into my possession because they're just not. They're strongly not for me. So first off, we've got the Blame Game. Blame Game is the Boros kind of suspect goad politics, for lack of a better understanding, commander. So that one's being helmed up by Nelly Borka, Impulsive Accuser.
Belborka's daughter.
It's yeah, of course, Bell Borka's daughter. Is that really? I have no idea.
It is.
Sure, I don't know who Bell Borka is, but all right, I'll take your word for it.
You're gonna get canceled for not knowing who Belborka is, but it is Belborka, the Spectral Sergeant. He's a bit of a Dominaria legend, bro. So
Only Dominaria legend bro that I keep track of is Lavinia, who is also in the set. But Nelly Borka, so it's 2 red white, a 2/4 human detective. So detectives, they were introduced in Doctor Who, now they're back again. Comes with vigilance, and whenever Nelly Borka attacks suspect target creature, then goad all suspected creatures. Again means they have menace and they cannot block. Then, whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls deals combat damage to one or more opponents, you and the controller of those creatures each draw a card.
yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, I think we're gonna actually have
Uh
a bit of a contention here. This
oh.
is crazy enough my most excited deck for this set.
Okay. Lay
I
lay it on me.
Yeah, so basically, I don't know if you've looked through any of these cards, but it's a really
Mhm.
fun pile of cardboard. I think Prisoner's Dilemma is one of the most interesting cards from this whole set. And so the idea of like copying that and getting to cast that a ton of times has me pretty excited. But I love kind of the Aikido aspect of this deck with like Deflecting Palm, your comeuppance, even like Selfish
Mhm.
Squire and stuff. I think this is a great political deck that's going to encourage people to attack. I find that a lot of newer players, waste their creatures, power and toughness by just letting them sit there for turn after turn after turn because they don't want to swing. This, suspect kind of gives them a bit of a, it goads as well, so it gives you an incentive to swing, and then it forces you to swing. And I think it's a kind of a very fun little political take on goading. It's Boros. Everybody loves a good Boros deck. Everybody loves a good Borka deck. Bell Borka, Nelly Borka. Sign me up.
Okay. So I look at this as like bad Brina, right? Because I love me some Brina the Demagogue.
Sure.
Classic Orzhov powerhouse. Beautiful, beautiful commander. Uh does kind of a similar thing. So when you convince your opponents, I mean it doesn't take much convincing. They really just they want to attack, right? So when you and your opponents attack other opponents, you draw some cards, you throw some counters around, all that good stuff. Where I think Nelly to me is like a paler imitation is with Brina, you can get multiple triggers in a turn because if they attack multiple opponents and the conditions are met, you could foreseeably get 2, 3 triggers per turn.
Sure.
Nelly is capping me with this one or more nonsense. I don't like this fair play nonsense.
Now, that's fair, but what I will posit as a defense is now, once people have played against Brina enough, they realize how crazy busted she is, and
I
they're
disagree.
they're less likely to take the deal because they will swing at you instead. Now, with Nelly Borka, you're goading the suspected creatures and you're preventing your opponents from even having the choice in the matter. So, like,
No,
a,
no,
a
no.
strong
I
enough table could
fully
resist your parcel tongue, your silver whispers in their ear, and I think that this deck is honestly perfect for you.
I think so. What you're okay? Okay, hold on. First off, so what you're telling me is we go to a game night, right? I should play Brina up front the first match, and then once I've cheesed everyone off, I switch to Nelly and be like, oh, now you can't attack me. Now that you've gotten wise of my maneuvers from the last game.
And then you never play with those people ever again. So you have this
That's how it is. I burn the town down and I start fresh, at another LGS down the road.
the Lone Ranger.
But no, I mean, listen, here's the thing. Nelly Borka may not be my favorite commander out of the ones we're going to go through. I don't think it even cracks probably top 5 for me, to be honest. But I do agree with you that like it's political fun with goading, so I think for a newer player it's a good fit. I also I up front, I'm in love with the reprints, or not just the reprints, but the new cards in this deck.
Sure.
So absolutely, I mean, Prisoner's Dilemma. I love Prisoner's Dilemma. Which, so for you guys who don't know, Prisoner's Dilemma is a secret voting card, where you can vote for silence or snitch. Now, if everybody votes for silence, you all take 4 damage for only the opponents. So you, the caster, is exempt from this. So if all your opponents vote silence, they all take 4 damage. If they all vote snitch, they all take 8 damage. Now, if you convince other people to vote snitch while you yourself say stay silent, you will take 0 damage and they will take 12 damage. So it's this nice little secret kind of shenanigan
It's the
play.
prisoner's dilemma. If you haven't heard, it's a philosophical argument. It's a cute reference to it.
I also like Mob Verdict, which is another secret voting card in this exact
Oh
same
yeah.
precon. Which is kind of the same thing. So everyone picks a player secretly, and each vote your opponents get, they take damage, and each vote you get, you draw a card.
Yeah, so
I mean,
the highest
it
the
goes a lot.
ceiling of this card is that you can draw four because
Sure.
assuming everybody chooses you, but then otherwise you can kind of team up with other players. I guess it's secret, so I don't know if there's ruling against lying, or if you can even
Mhm.
reveal what you have chosen. But otherwise, this is a board wipe and card draw stapled into one card.
Now I like the idea because when I first came across Prisoner's Dilemma, it was suggested to me by one of our friends, Josh, actually, to put it in my Mathis deck, which I just recently got, uh, as like a fun political in red screw with people piece. And
Absolutely.
I think it's already gonna get slotted right in there. And Mob Verdict might also get slotted right in there too, because I love the idea of a late game, like, hey, you're below 4 life, so you essentially have to vote, in a way that ideally you take 0 damage, right?
Yeah, this is going into my Gandalf deck for sure. Both Mob Verdict and Prisoner's Dilemma are really cute spells to copy a ton of times, and if you have a damage doubler, these spells
Mhm.
get insane. Dealing 12 damage times 2 or 3 is like, oh wow, that's game over pretty quick.
Speaking of damage doubler, let's take a quick look at some of the reprints. Now, I will say out of the 4 decks, this and maybe the next one were probably about the lightest on like reprint value, but it does come with Fiendish Duo, which the last check was hovering around $8. Fiendish Duo is just simply, hey, deals double damage. Whenever a red source would deal damage, deals double damage. I don't even think it's red source. I think it literally is just deal double damage.
No, it's any source to an opponent, so it actually multiplies your opponent's damage dealt to them as well.
See, so right there, you're goading stuff, you're dealing double damage, you're getting that prisoner's dilemma off. I think you're already winning me over, just me talking about this deck.
Your other notable reprints are, going to be Lauren of the Third Path is a really solid card for
Hmm.
this. Um, you get a little bit of that Gisela Blade of the Gold Knight action, which wasn't super expensive after it was reprinted in Commander Masters, but is still a super relevant card. Comeuppance, deflecting palm, a lot of that like Aikido kind of stuff as well. are relatively expensive but are surprisingly printed. And then the land and the land base in this deck is fun and interactive as well, and it's not, it's not a hunk of junk. It's functional cardboard here. So war room.
Yeah, I will say this, like they've upped the lands in these 4 decks here because it how often are you used to open up precon and it's like, all right, well, 20 of them, 25 of them are all basics. Like without batting an eye, and then everything else is like temple of this.
Right.
So they've definitely upped that, I think, as far as giving you a war room. I think Access Tunnel and Rogue's Passage are both in there, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
it's correct.
So you do have like some really fun options. But speaking of fun options, let's look at the backup commander as well, because in recent years there's been a huge debate about backup commanders maybe being better, possibly, than the main commander. So your backup commander in this deck is a new Feather, Son of Feather, or Son of Heather, actually, Cole, if you didn't know that. So this is Feather Radiant Arbiter. Red, white, white for a 4/3 flying lifelinking angel. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell that targets only Feather, you may choose any number of other creatures that spell could target and pay 2 colorless for each of those creatures. If you do, for each of those creatures, copy that spell. And it comes with the whole caveat of like permanent spells become tokens, so if it's like an aura or something along those lines. What do you think on this front? It is very much the Ivy alien kind of look here.
Yeah, or like Zerda. To be honest with you,
Mhm.
I think this is it's an interesting it's an interesting deck. I don't know, or an interesting legendary creature. I don't know how well it'll work for the alternate commander for this deck. Obviously, you do have a lot of like little auras and things, but I like this more as like a feather, 2.0 in a feather deck, or a little bit of a different Zerda deck where you're trying to get you know a lot of value out of your spells. Having to pay the 2 mana for each of them is going to hinder it, so it makes it maybe a little bit more palatable for a slower table. But I like it. It's got flying and lifelink. 3 mana 4/3. Sign me up.
Yeah, I like it too. Like I said, this is very much like a Zadahedron grinder kind of thing where you target and it copies for everything on your side of the field that it could target. I mean, you are in white, which brings up some more interesting possibilities. I was even thinking, because you don't necessarily have to control the other creatures, it might be fun to do something like a removal spell targeting Feather and then pay, a bunch of extra mana you might have lying around and kind of turn it into a pseudo board wipe against things.
Do it to yourself with a path to exile and ramp yourself off some tokens. I mean, seems
Hmm.
it seems strong with the with the right arsenal.
Yeah, there's definitely some weird stuff to it. Um, so yeah, I mean, suspect gold politics. I think this one here, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think this one here is probably the most accessible for a new player out of the 4 we're gonna look at.
Yeah, I think that's for sure the definitely the least mechanically heavy or complex. But not to say that the others are too inaccessible. But this one will be easy for anybody to pick up.
All right, so what are we talking? A through F. What would you give Blame Game?
Well, for me, I'm going with a
I guess S through F.
let's do a B, which is
Okay,
pretty
yeah.
an 80. No, that's not a bad grade. If anybody tells you a B is a bad grade, they're out of their minds.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. I would say like high C, low B, somewhere in there. I think this one probably has the most meh collection of creatures, maybe to me, and probably like the coolest set of new cards for instance in sorceries. But next up, moving on, we've got a Deadly Disguise. So this is going to be your all inclusive, rack your brain with confusion, morph, disguise, manifest, cloak, mega morph nonsense. Uh, sure.
Yeah.
But this is going to be led up by Kaust, Eye of the Glade, which is going to be a hybrid Boros and a green, so only 2 mana. For a 2/2 Dryad Detective, whenever a creature you control that was turned face up this turn deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, and you can tap cost to turn target face down attacking creature you control face up.
Yeah. This is so for me. This is kind of my least excited deck, least anticipated deck out of these precons. I We kind of talked about it earlier. It's difficult to keep track of things when they're upside down. I love Kadena, the slinking sorcerer, but having all these morph creatures, flipping up and down, it's just a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Traps gone wrong. I'm gonna have to be flipping and keeping track of everything every game, and for a newer player that's going to get confusing, or you might even have to come up with some sort of mnemonic device to figure out how you're organizing your own creatures. I like the colors, I like the reprints, but you'd have to do some convincing on this one for me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you. I mean, you got to look at this card. So first, I'm just looking at the commander. So I'm assuming the gameplay pattern is I play a card face down, whether it's morph or whatever. I swing my 2/2 face down creature, and they decide, well, I'm not going to block it for whatever reason because it's a 2/2 vanilla. And then as I'm attacking, I tap cost to then flip the creature to then deal damage to draw a card, and then maybe because some of the morph stuff has, when this card's flipped up, do whatever ability, destroy a dragon or whatever it is, and then I get some ancillary effect from it flipping face up.
Yeah.
I I don't know.
I mean, you described it pretty succinctly. I don't. It's not as complicated as it seems. It's just, is the payoff, really that interesting? Who's to say? Not for
Yeah,
me.
and I mean, yeah. Now going through some of the morph cards and stuff they have in there though, like as far as the like I said, flip and they do this and that. I don't know. They don't seem that cohesive. It just seems sort of like what morph cards can we reprint that all cost 50 cents from the past 15 years? So they are sort of a weird hodgepodge of creatures. But I think the confusion from this comes from the maintaining that board state of like, well, this is morph, but it's not morph with ward because that's the disguised one over here. But this one's actually manifested, so this one could actually be a instant that just came off the top of my deck. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan here.
Well, and then don't forget these
Um,
ones have been afflicted by Eudora Grave Gardener, so they're also forests in addition to.
there are also forests because Eudora is in this
But
deck.
then somebody plays a
Um,
Blood Moon. Oh no!
also, I this one also I feel like has the least cohesive backup commander with the deck because you could at least argue like maybe Feather you could get some traction with the right spells and stuff. So the backup commander of this one is Descana, the Rage Mother, 2 red, green, white for a 5/5 bear. When Descana, the Rage Mother enters the battlefield, draw a card for each creature you control with base power 2/2, power and toughness 2/2. When a creature you control with base power and toughness 2/2 attacks, it gets +3/+3 till end of turn. So this is just swing my morph creature, and it's actually a 5/5.
Which is a kind of a wimpy boost. I mean, it's still a 5/5 without trample, or it's at the end of the day, it's getting chump blocked, my man.
Yeah, so it's a 5/5 without like trample, menace, any kind of evasion. I think Descana is going to see more play as an actual bear commander. Like
For sure.
hey, Eula, like Ayula does the mono green bear thing. This will be red, green, and white bears. I don't know. I don't really see where this deck is gonna get a lot of traction in the long run.
Yeah,
Um,
I like
hmm.
white for the protection. I mean, maybe if you ran this as a dedicated face down, morph deck, you could use Duskana to refill your hand as a board wipe protection, because obviously, like, a creature based deck, one of your biggest weaknesses is like getting wiped and losing all your creatures. With Duskana,
Mhm.
you draw after you play an army of either garbage bears or 2/2 face down creatures, refill your hand, play. Hopefully you can survive any sort of removal spells with your white protection. I think there might be some room for Duskana to be relevant, but not without further upgrading.
Yeah. And then also the reprints in this deck don't make a lot of sense. I mean, there's decent reprints in this deck. So you've got Toski Bearer Secrets, you've got Seedborn Muse, you've got Jessica's Will, which are all like fairly decent reprints. They're all a couple dollars. Jessica's Will, I think, is hovering around 15, $16. Um,
I
but
think more than
again,
that,
they
to be
don't
honest
seem
with
to
you, before
make.
this reprint, like 20, 20, 25
Oh,
at least.
yeah,
Yeah.
possibly. But I mean, do they work in any way with this deck? I don't think so.
Well, here's the thing, man. Jessica's Will. So you play Coust on turn. This is okay. There's very rarely a chance that you're going to get to play
Sure.
this guy on turn one, but you're always going to have Coust out before you cast Jessica's Will, just because of his low
Okay.
cost. That's a very synergistic card, regardless of mechanics. You're casting this guy and then Jessica's Will every single turn three.
I thought you were going to say your argument for this deck was like how some people used to buy the Calamex deck just to get their hands on the deflecting swat. It's gonna be
that
like, I bought this deck so I could get the Jessica's Will out of it.
that very well might be true.
um, yeah, so I don't know. This one's not for me. If I was gonna make a prediction, and you could tell me if you think I'm right or wrong, but if I was gonna make a prediction, I think I could see this at the end of the year when we do our 2024 retrospective. This being maybe the least purchased or least used commander of all the precon face commanders.
Our 2024 Dukiest Commanders of the Year award.
Yeah. And I don't think it's gonna be Discon. I think it's gonna be Koust, Eye of the Glade.
No, I
Um,
foresee Duskana getting a bear following for sure.
yeah, Discano's gonna get the bear buff, the bear boosting,
The
100%.
those
But
buff bears.
Koust, I don't see it. I'm not seeing that one. Um, S through F. What are we thinking here?
Okay, hear me out. I know we were talking a lot of smack on this deck, but I want to give it a D minus. That's almost the worst grade it can be, but not quite.
Yeah, yeah. This is I'm right there with you. This is a D minus for sure. This out of the four, this was easily number four. I mean, it's like for me, there's one and two, a big golf, and then this.
Yeah.
Um. All right. Next up is one. This is where I'm going to get a little more excited. A little, I'm feeling it now. We're moving up the rankings in my mind. Deep Clusey.
Whoa.
Uh,
Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun.
this one is helmed up by Morska Undersea Sleuth. We got a little Bant action, green, white, blue. For a 2/3, not a Merfolk. I don't know why, but not a Merfolk. This is a Vidalcan Fish Detective. You have no maximum hand size, so you get that little reliquary tower just stapled right on there. When or at the beginning of your upkeep, investigate. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, put 2/1/1 counters on Morska Undersea Sleuth. Okay. I like it. I think I would like it more if Morska had some kind of evasion, like if he came in with menace or flying or something. Death touch, anything.
Then
But
you'd be too strong. What are you talking about? Why does everything need to be like, this Morska has to get bigger? You just want another Brina. You just want another flying, evasive creature that is going to get bigger over time. And I blink, and now I'm getting hit for 14 commander damage.
exactly, that's what I need.
No,
So
yeah. Talk to me about this deck.
I like it. So you're automatically investigating. So I mean, on your turn, you're practically guaranteed to draw those two cards, right? One from your draw step, one from you cracking a clue. I think it's beautiful. Also, this right here probably has, if not the second most impressive listing of reprints. Like, just hear me out. Close your eyes for a second, Cole. I want this to wash over you. So we're talking in potential other legendary creatures you could have. Tulane, Teller of Tales, famously broken commander.
Right.
Adrix and Nev, twin casters, famously abusable in certain decks.
Go on.
Coma, which is also a disgusting commander to deal with. Any Brax, which is like a $6 commander. Alondra, which is like a $4 or $5 commander. I mean, it just keeps stacking one after the other, hit after hit after hit, banger after banger, and then right when you get to the end of the creature reprints, they slap the farewell down into this deck and just jack that value up through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly an impressive deck for reprints. That's to be sure. I mean, if you want a Simic or Bant, the worst deck at the table, like in terms of crowd unpleasers, this is going to be it. You slam down a Coma, and I pack myself up and leave. Benny Brax,
Even
zoologist, is in this, which is
there's Essex, Fractal Bloom, or whatever's in here too.
yeah, this is a huge card for reprint value, and I think it is indicative of the quality of decks that are coming out. Nowadays, they're sticking with this, impressive roster.
Yeah, this is one of those decks where, like, listen, if you don't like Morska, you could easily buy this deck and have pieces for like 4 or 5 other decks, depending on what direction you want to go in.
Yeah,
But, and not to mention, I think this has probably my favorite backup commander out of the whole set, too. So
definitely.
if Morska's not doing it for you, let's talk Sophia Dogged Detective. So that's 1 in Bant, so a total of 4 mana for a 3/4 human detective. When Sophia enters the battlefield, you create Tiny, a legendary 2/2 green dog detective creature token with trample. For 1 colorless and sacrificing an artifact token, you put a 1/1 counter on each dog you control. Then, whenever a dog deals combat damage to a player, create a food token, then investigate. So, I mean, you've got life gain, you've got card draw, you've got buffing creatures out of this.
You
I
got the
sheesh,
flavor win. I mean, if you haven't noticed, this is Shaggy and Scooby. Sophia and Tiny make food tokens. They're a super cute detective dog human pair. This is a flavor win in the the greatest meaning of the word. I can't wait for the secret lair. I'm calling it now, of Scooby Doo, where this is printed as Shaggy and Scooby, and I can't wait to see the Scooby token that comes with it.
Mhm. It's also got some interesting, like, newer cards. So Disorder in the Court looks like a lot of fun, which is an X spell. So it's an X Azoria spell that lets you exile a creature from each player, and then you return them at the next turn, but you get to investigate however many times equal to X. So it's got some like little fun tidbits on this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this seems like a very fun deck. I love investigating. I think having the no max hand size on Morska is going to be super convenient, and I'm excited for the kind of you're encouraged to draw spells on everybody's turns. So I think there's going to be a lot of like interaction and instant speed, attempting to draw cards on 4 players turns, each turn rotation to get the max value out of Morska.
Yeah, I agree. And frankly, I mean, with these colors too, these are great colors for a precon deck. You've got your green ramp, you've got your blue card draw, you've got your white removal. So as far as like right out the box, fun deck to play with, you have a ton of ways to draw that second card. So don't you worry there. And if you decide to go the Sophia route, I think that even looks like a fun deck, like a Bant Dogs or Bant Artifact deck. And that's before we look at even other reprints, because this thing also has like Academy Manufacturer and all kinds of other stuff in there.
Right.
So this deck right here to me, this deck and the next one to me is like, hey, way ahead of the other two.
Well,
Now don't get me wrong, Blame Game looks like fun. Deadly Disguise, but I think this one right here is kind of like the one that I kind of gravitate towards.
so let's hear it. What's your rating for this deck then on a S to F scale?
This right here, I'm gonna go A plus. I don't think this is an S, but I think this is an A plus right here. Um, One because of the commanders. Two, it does what it wants to do really well, which is draw you a lot of cards and get triggers off of that. And then three, I mean, listen, Cole, I said it again. Banger after banger after banger. Like so I tear this sucker down and I've got enough commanders to just be like the terror of any pod.
I absolutely hear you on that, and that's why my ranking for this. Keep in mind this is relevant to what I graded my earlier, precon as a B for the Blame Game. I'm gonna actually go with an S for the Deep Blue Sea. I think it's got a ton of potential. It's a dirty, nasty Bant deck that's gonna get lands. It's gonna have cards in hand to be able to fuel your spells, and I think it's gonna run really smoothly off the jump.
Yeah, completely agree. Now let's look at the last one, which I also think is a really solid deck coming out of the box. We have Revenant Recon, and this one's going to be helmed up by Mirko Obsessive Theorist, which is one blue black for a 1/3 vampire detective. Comes with flying and vigilance. Whenever you surveil, put a 1/1 counter on Mirko. At the beginning of your end step, you may return target creature with power less than Mirko's from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So we saw finality counters back in Ixalan,
Right.
but essentially they mean if the creature would die, it gets exiled instead. Now, I think just so for you guys that don't recall, back at home, so Surveil, you can look at the top card of your library and you can either leave it on top or you can chuck it into the graveyard. So a little bit of self mill. Um, I like it. I mean, when I said that the last one, if only the last one had evasion, well, guess what? This one comes flying and vigilance, so I got my evasion
Right there.
right there, and then I get my counters. Get a little recursion action, so I don't really care if I throw some creatures into the graveyard. Oh, feels good.
Yeah, I think this deck is great. You know me, you love me, the Demir Daddy. I gotta give my opinion on every Demir deck that comes out, and I think that this one is pretty solid. It's got some fun pieces in it. A lot of like really great reanimation targets, which we're going to talk about the reprint value in this deck, but this deck is just begging you to reanimate stuff, and it's going to give you the tools to do it. um, I personally really like the alternative commander for this deck, Marvo, the Deep Operative. It takes the deck in a little bit of a different direction, but it gets to the same core of what you want to be doing with reanimation, which is like cheating out bigger, cost creatures for lower cost spells. Marvo, he allows you to clash with a defending player, which when he attacks, you are going to reveal the top card of your library along with the player that you're clashing with, and whoever has the highest CMC wins the clash. And if you win a clash, you get to draw a card and play a spell from your hand with CMC 8 or less without paying its mana cost. So I think that this is like I said, it kind of encourages the same technique that reanimating wants to do, where you want to discard something crazy big like a Sphinx of the Second Sun, and then cast a 1 mana reanimate spell to bring it out at maximum value. This Marvo is going to let you do that with anything. It doesn't have to be a creature. You could do like some sort of crazy, omniscience level enchantment that you're going to get a lot of value out of.
Yeah, I like this a lot. I mean, so Clash is essentially the magic way of saying I'm playing war with somebody off the top of my deck.
Right.
Uh, Also, I mean, the fact that Marvo, and I didn't realize this until I was adding the card into our like our show notes here. Marvo's a 1/8, so it's gonna just eat up anything that comes at you that doesn't have some kind of menace or or flying or
Death
something like
touch.
that. Yeah, so any like thing you could normally chump block, I mean, he's going to absolutely just body it.
Yeah, he's an octopus rogue, by the way, and his art is like, uh, honestly, I'm in love with it. Any octopus fans in the chat will feel me on that one.
Octo Gang,
Yeah, Octo
Octo
Gang,
Gang, rise
rise
up.
up.
Yeah, and like you said, so reprints. I mean, this thing probably has the most impressive recursion package I've seen of any precon whatsoever. I mean, you would be hard pressed to build a deck that out the gates had a more impressive reanimation package. So you've got Mirko himself. So Mirko himself reanimates, but you also have Animate Dead, Reanimate, Necromancy, and in case you want to go whole hog and just reanimate everything, Rise from the Dark Realms.
Yeah, which if you're keeping track at home, that's like probably $40 or $50 total, worth of cards over four pieces of cardboard. Like that, they're really top notch reanimation spells, whether they're enchantments or like Rise of the Dark Realms is something that my jaw dropped when I saw that this was in this deck list.
Mm-hmm. Other notable reprints I think should be brought up. Toxic Deluge is in here, which is still hovering around the $5 to $7 mark. Um, Phyrexian Metamorph also not a cheap card. I mean, I think it's under 10 at this point, but still, kind of creeps up in value if it doesn't get reprinted often. And that's one of those enter the battlefield, become a copy of creature or artifact. So I mean, decent value reprints. This is sort of like the opposite of the last one, right? Like the Deep Blue Sea had the best creature reprints, and this one has like the best sorcery kind of reprints.
Right. I mean, overall, this is a very impressive deck right out the gate. Yeah, it's got Sir Conrad the Grim in there too, Massacre Worm. I mean, honestly, I'm pretty impressed with the reprints. Doom Whisperer is like used to be a pretty expensive card when that was like big in other formats. Like it's got some great spell reprint value, but then also like just with the nature of it being reanimator, you got some good bombs in here, even if they're not necessarily high monetary value. It's just a valuable reanimation package.
Yeah, and it also has a lot of really good surveil cards. So like, oh, into your turn, surveil this. There's a couple that say anytime you surveil, you're actually going to look at two cards instead of one. So there are some decent pieces in here. So even though Mirko himself doesn't make you surveil, there's enough of a support package in there that you're going to find yourself surveilling. I would say multiple times a turn, easy.
Also,
Um,
did we mention Phyrexian Arena? Like,
there is Phyrexian Arena, which I know has gone down a little bit in price, but is still a couple dollar card. It's still in black, a decent draw spell. Um, so I mean, this right here. So I'm gonna jump the gates on this one. This is the deck I'm giving an S to. So don't get me wrong. The Bant one I love. This one here I think has the whole package for. Hey, it does exactly what it wants to do, and it's got the best cards to do it in.
So, what's your numerical rating for this, or your alpha numerical?
S
Okay,
S
I'll match you,
S
with a
A.
very similarly. I'll do an A plus. I think
Okay.
overall, this deck has a lot of great reanimator pieces in it, but I think it, in terms of like flavor wise, it's kind of the most lacking for me. It doesn't scream out the gate clue. It doesn't scream like this could be a
Mhm.
deck that came out of any set, and I would believe it. It's a pretty generic reanimator deck at the end of the day.
Sure. I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, Blame Game definitely plays the suspect goad bit. Deadly Disguise, even though it's not really for, I'll say it's not for me, but I think it's not for either of us really. Does play that sort of cloak and dagger mystery bits. Yeah, the other one plays clues. So I agree. This could be easily one that pops up in any set as like a, oh, Surveil just needed a new update.
Yeah.
So there you guys have it. That is our precon. So if you were to recommend buying one of them, Cole, who and or what would you recommend purchasing, I guess? And which of the commanders would you run in said deck?
Well, that is an impossible question because, like, if you were a new player and you had no deck ever, I would probably tell you the blame game. I think it's fun. It kind of gets people into the spirit of Commander, which is interacting and talking to people and pointing at their creatures and looking at other people's creatures. That's the most fun part of Magic for me. So I would recommend blame game. I think Nelly Borka is really great as the front man of that deck. But theoretically, I pulled a really sweet copy of Aurelia, the Law Above, and that would have a running as a potential commander for this. But if you do have decks or you're used to playing Magic, depending on what you kind of are lacking, if you don't have a dedicated reanimator deck, this was a really great opportunity to pick one up for cheap. um, if you want to have a bad time, I think the best deck is Deadly Disguise. Like, if you just do not like having fun, Deadly Disguise all the way.
If you want to hate yourself and the table because you have to take 8-minute turns because you keep having to remind yourself what was underneath each one of those cards, you have to flip them up. Yeah, yeah. Deadly Disguise all the way.
So
Um, no, you know what? I'm in the same boat. I think if you're listening to this and you're a newer player or you're a player that um maybe is like, hey, I don't like overly complex decks. I want a very straightforward. I can slap it on the table and just go and have a great game. Blame game, 100%. It's got, I would say, probably the best collection of new cards as well. And we didn't even talk about a lot of them, but I mean, like, Spectacular Showdown, I think jumps out to me as a great one, which is you give one creature double strike and then it's goaded, or you can overload it to give everybody double strike.
right.
And it's a double strike counter, so it sticks on there too and goads everything. So I think that's the most like out of the box. I just want to have a fun time at game night. If you're in it for the reprint value or the potential to tear down and build other things, I would say Deep Clue C. Or in my case, I don't have a reanimator deck, so I'm going to go the Revenant Recon and kind of go Surveil Central. Um, and yeah, if you hate yourself and you hate everyone around you, go Deadly Disguise. But I would say my top two vote getters on this front would be Blame Game from the simplicity, kind of like, hey, I want to have a great time without really overanalyzing, or Revenant Recon if you want to go the opposite route, where it's like, hey, I need to analyze my moves, but I'm gonna have a lot of fun doing it.
Right on.
But that being said, guys, so you've heard our thoughts on the precons. We're gonna take a quick break, snag some water. When we get back, we're going to be looking at the non-precon portion of this set. So commanders that aren't in the decks, some top 99, all that good stuff. So we will catch you back in just a few minutes. What's going on, guys? Thanks for hanging out throughout our break. We are back and we're talking about the mysterious happenings, the murders at Karlov Manor. Coming out last week, I guess, with pre-release. This week with actual release, but it's kind of like last week and this week because they all blur together at this point. So before the break, you guys, we talked all four precons, the two good ones, the other two that also exist, and now we'll be hopping into the non-precon cards that should be piquing your interest.
I'm excited because even though this set had some interesting precons, I think the non-precon cards, the cards from the set, are really interesting and mechanically relevant for a lot of my decks. I think a lot of the commons and uncommons from this set are going to find themselves slotted into my decks.
So this set here, because one, obviously Wizards owned by Hasbro, but so is Clue. So this set came with a pretty heavy tie-in into the Clue-niverse, as it were.
Nice.
I had it. So with that, they're not really secret layers per se, but it did come with 6 commanders that are variations of your favorite Clue suspects. So your Miss Scarlets, your Colonel Mustards, uh, Mr. Green, all that kind of stuff have been reimagined as magic commanders. We also have some weapons. We've got some rooms. So all your favorite rooms, like the kitchen, the conservatory, the candlestick, the rope, all that good stuff is right back in this set. I don't know. Did any of these stand out to you, Cole?
Yeah, I actually love all the Clue, themed characters. Like I said
Hmm.
earlier, I played Clue a lot growing up, so I think I got a real kick out of that. And then I think personally, out of all of them, Colonel Mustard is definitely my number one. Um,
Sure.
I really like his ability. I think it's a card that I think will see a lot of play as a commander just because it's so strong. Um, So this is the MTG version of Colonel Mustard. It's Commander Mustard. So basically, if you're playing Commander, you should be playing this card, or you're not really playing Commander. But he's a 5-drop. It's Boros and 3 colorless for a human soldier. He has Vigilance. He's a 5/5, and he gives other soldiers you control Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. Wow, that's a Gishath worth of keywords there, and that alone is good for me. But on top of that, he has a secondary ability 2 and Boros. You can activate this as many times as you want. It gives until end of turn, soldiers you control gain whenever this creature attacks, it deals 1 damage to defending player. So that ability stacks up on itself, and if you're able to, pump this ability up enough times, this can just straight up kill the entire table with 1 swing. Great card.
Yeah, I think that's the one that probably has the most power coming out of the box. First off, I like how they all got like promotions, so to speak. So Colonel Mustard's now Commander Mustard. Instead of Mr. Green, he's Emissary Green. We've got Senator Peacock, Apothecary White. Like they've all been like upgraded a little bit here. The other ones, yeah, they have interesting abilities, but I do think that Commander Mustard's got the best ability. So Apothecary White, for example, is a mono white. Whenever you attack, you create a food token for each player being attacked, and then you can tap those food to make that many human, like just one human tokens. Senator Peacock turns all of your artifacts into into clues, and then when you sacrifice clues, you can make creatures unblockable. Plum is whenever you attack, you exile one creature from your or I'm sorry, one card from your graveyard, and then if an artifact card was exiled this way, you create a treasure. And if you cast a spell, if mana was spent from a treasure, you draw a card and you lose a life. So they all kind of have like interesting abilities, but I do agree that Commander Mustard. Sorry, I almost disrespected the great commander there. Um, I think he's got probably the most out of the gates worthy ability. The weapons, as far as like the wrench, candlestick, pipe, knife, and rope, they're all okay. I guess they're all little equipments that give like some small effect,
Okay.
and then they're also clues.
Okay, and they're one mana. You're like, oh, they're okay. They do, they're wimpy
Yeah,
little equipments. Yeah,
they're
they're
okay.
one mana. They're awesome for what they do, which is
Right.
they refill
Listen,
your
they're
hand when you're
okay.
done with them, and they they give a minor stat boost and an extra little ability stapled on there.
I will say, so I opened up a pack, and I think I already got the candlestick. Not the full art, but like some little candlestick version,
Uh huh.
which is like equipped creature gets 1/1, and then when they attack, you surveil 2.
Sure.
Which, hey, maybe I'll slot it right into my Mirko surveil deck.
That sounds great for it.
So yeah, I mean they're workable, right? And then the rooms are essentially like tap dual lands. So they come in, they can tap for 1 or 2 colors, or you can pay for to tap and have them investigate. So maybe not the most effective way to get your hands on clues, but hey,
It's better than
they're
nothing. It's better than
yeah, it's better
nothing.
than nothing. And they come in. They've got one for each guild, so they do have 10 of them, which I didn't realize there was exactly 10 rooms in Clue, but I guess there are if you include the secret passage.
Ooh.
So I just thought those were worth talking about. I don't think we're going to see them run as often as maybe other secret layers, but I did think it was worth kind of bringing up just mention that they're out there, sort of similar to like the D&D secret layer ones where in theory you might run across a forge Neverwinter charlatan in the wild, but you probably won't until you build it.
Right. I think they're cool cards, and especially if you are a Clue fanboy, this plays
Mhm.
into the you can share your passion for two pretty nerdy tabletop games at the exact same time.
Are you calling them Clue? First off, they're known as Clue what? Clue dorks? If you're listen,
Cluvians.
if you're yeah, if you're insulting the Cluvians, first off, it's not nerdy because they're all Hasbros.
Oh, true crime Hasbros.
Yeah. So that's that. Now, I do think some of the cooler, more exciting commanders are actually outside of the precon decks as well. So we did want to highlight some cool commander options that you might want to check out that you might maybe want to build a deck around, maybe don't want to build a deck around, but you should be aware that they exist. So Cole, did you have any commanders? Like what kind of commanders were jumping out at you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are like a ton. Everything that got spoiled pretty quickly was on fire. Like when I saw the Pride of the Whole Clade, I was kind of looking at my Galta deck like, uh, should I make some changes there? I obviously slapped myself out of it, and I am not doing that. But I think there were some really strong legendary creatures off the top. The one of the coolest ones that I noticed was Judith, the Carnage Connoisseur.
Mhm.
It's going to give your instants and sorceries a bonus effect of either having Death Touch and Lifelink, or creating a 2/2 red imp creature that, when it dies, deals 2 damage to each opponent. That's each opponent. That's pretty relevant. That's 6 damage total for any spell cast, be it a Read the Bones or Sign in Blood. And a lot of spells aren't going to see much benefit from that first effect there, of gaining Death Touch and Lifelink. Uh, but the spells that do, like I'm thinking, Blasphemous Act or something in this
Mm.
range, are going to be very impactful and are going to take you from 40 life to 400 life and in a matter of one red mana. Um,
Yeah, it would have to be like your Blasphemous Action or like Chain Reaction or something along those lines.
and then when if it doesn't have a damage effect, you just default to making a 2/2 red imp and turn your non-damaging spells into 6 damage after that token dies. It's
Mm.
it's it's a gimmick, and I think as soon as you play Judith, she's gonna attract a lot of removal because one time getting blasphemous acted and seeing that damage, that life gain just fly, or a single pinger effect gain death touch and just turn a 1 mana uh earthquake effect into a board wipe. It's gonna attract removal, but it looks like a fun Rakdos deck.
Yeah, you know what it kind of reminds me of is the Boros like Minotaur one.
Fire Song and Sunsea Speaker.
Yeah, where it's like all red spells get lifelink and all white spells get. It's not death touch. They all
I
get.
think they both gain lifelink. Red and white instants and sorceries gain lifelink, and then whenever you deal damage or with a spell, he deals damage, or they deal damage, like 3 damage. They bolt something.
Sure. Oh well, I thought it was whenever you gain life they deal damage, and then
The-
whenever you.
Bam.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whenever it causes you to gain life, you deal damage, and whenever deals damage, you gain
So
life
I
or something like
stand by
that.
what I said. I stand by what I said. Whenever you deal damage
Sure,
with a spell,
sure.
you gain that life back. So it's a roundabout way, but it was
It's
technically still
whenever
true.
okay, it's whenever a red listen, I got it down. It's whenever a red spell deals damage, it has lifelink. Whenever a white spell causes you to gain life, it deals damage. 100%. I'm not even looking at it. Red spell has lifelink. White spell deals burn damage when it gains life. 100%.
No, dude. You're. I mean, you're.
Locked in.
No, you're absolutely wrong.
Locked in.
That would be really
I'm
cool.
100% right.
That would be really cool, but that's simply not the case. The red instant and sorcery spells you control have lifelink. Whenever a white instant or sorcery spell causes you to gain life, he deals 3 damage to target creature or player.
Oh,
I am shocked.
shooketh.
What you say? Yeah, I made a fool of myself on the internet, and I.
You'll never live it down. So, I'm glad that we got that text out of the way because it has absolutely nothing to do with murders at Karlov Manor.
I feel like I just got murdered with how
Um,
that went down.
but yeah, so Judith, anyways, it's one line is Fire Song in Sun Weaver or whatever, uh, and the second line is what Blim comedic.
No,
What's the one that makes imps or whatever? There's one that like throws out those stupid little
Zerzoth
1/1
makes
devils.
imps.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Zerzoth.
Blim gives stuff away. He's the
Yeah, and that deals
Zedru.
damage.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I don't
like
know.
Judith.
I mean, Rakdos Spell Slinger.
Yeah, it's a fun archetype. Sign me up. Sign in blood.
I also agree with your thoughts on like the Pride of Hulklade. First off, I mean it's a crocodile elk turtle that costs 11.
Sure.
No, you're never paying 11 for this thing because it's X. So just so you guys know, so it's 10 colorless and a green for a 2/15. And the spell costs X less to cast, where X is the highest or is the total toughness of creatures you control. So having creatures out means that you're not paying 11.
Yeah.
Comes with Defender, and then for 2 and 2 blue, until the end of turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player. Draw cards equal to its toughness, and it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. This is like Arcades on crack.
Yeah, I'm like, for me, as a Galta player, I agree with your statement of like, you're literally never casting this for 11. You're probably casting this on turn 3 or 4 if you have an optimized deck. And the ability
Mhm.
to make himself, +1/+0, and whenever he deals combat damage, draw 15 is. I think with the
Uh,
number of Simic cards out there that make creatures unblockable, I'm just like, I'm snoozing on this because I feel like having 15 cards in hand after a single lucky combat step is like, not a super fun experience for everybody else if you're filling your hand with counter spells, or like you know burgeoning effects where you're going to be pumping out a million lands and just getting that excellent generic Simic value. I think he's cool, but I for me as a Galta player,
well,
I'm kind of shaking my fist at the sky in a way.
so I already found a home for this card. I haven't gotten the card yet, but I already have found a perfect home in one of my pre-existing decks.
Okay.
Uh, Azuri Claw of Progress,
Oh.
because he triggers the experience counter because he's technically 2 power, which means if you bring him down, and let's say I already have 4 or 5 experience counters, let's just say 5 because it's an easy number to get to, like, without breaking a sweat. Got a 720 that could just wreck house on anything I want, draw me a fifth of my deck.
Yeah. I think it's a really cool card, and I'm not, I would never refuse to sit down across from it in the command zone, but I feel like it's pretty strong, and I'm excited to see the impact it has on the Galta community as a whole, and other Simic small boys rise up communities.
Speaking of small boys, I think this was one of the first ones that was teased, and I think a lot of people were very excited right out the gates. Delney Streetwise Lookout,
Definitely.
two and a white for a 2/2. Creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. And then it's a small harmonicon, I guess it would be it would be called. So if an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers an additional time. And of course, what we're gonna call this small thing that gets triggered an additional time, let's just call it an Esper Sentinel. Uh, to just start racking up Esper Sentinel triggers.
Yeah, this thing combos with like a ham sandwich, like Preston the Vanisher, and all sorts of. You get some crazy effects off of all the relevant creatures, power 2 or less. Which, spoiler alert, is a ton of them. I like her. I think she's going to be a super popular mono white commander.
Oh yeah, I mean this is one I think out the gates. This was probably the first one I when I saw it I was like, oh yeah, 100% I'm gonna build this. And now I've softened on it a little bit only because I can't build everything,
Right,
but but
but you can try.
I can try. There's only I mean hey look, there's only what like 1700 commanders or something, 1800
The
something like that.
1700 commander deck challenge.
God forbid at every background I have to build it again with every single background.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I think this is gonna be a super popular one. Uh Also in the monocolor things, I'm a big fan of Massacre Girl,
Sure.
both old and new Massacre Girl. So the new one is 2 black for a 4/4 with menace. Creatures you control have wither. Now, if you remember from our underused abilities that I think should return, Wither was on it because I love me some Wither.
You finally have been vindicated.
I finally could have a deck where everything has Wither. And then whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. In other words, I have to destroy it kind of via -1/-1 effects. Which, I mean, if we're talking Toxic Deluge, if we're talking every degenerate thing you would ever put in a Toxrill deck, all right here.
Yeah, coming from a guy who used to play a She-Ray, Shiza's caretaker deck, where all my
Oh,
creatures were, power one or less, or I know it's toughness, but like, typically my creatures were pretty small. Any sort of, token strategy or anything with a number, if you're playing a Delney Streetwise Lookout deck with a lot of power two or less creatures, you typically have, toughness two or less along with that. So Wither really strong. Card draw really strong. I think Massacre Girl is awesome for 4 mana. A 4 mana 4/4 with
mhm.
that many abilities is just bound to cause some trouble.
Yeah, it also has that, or I'm sorry, it does not have that infamous text. This only triggers once per turn, so you could have some kind of board wipe, some kind of like meat hook massacre or toxic deluge effect, wipe a ton of things off the board, or even OG Massacre Girl, wipe a ton of things off the board and just draw to your heart's content.
Yeah, she's going to be good in a lot of decks as well that care about -1/-1 counters. Not that that's like a crazy archetype right at the moment, but like people have been talking about it with the Scorpion God for a long time, or like Hepatra, Vizier of Poisons, that care about -1/-1 counters. This is a rare win for that, very small niche of Magic.
Yeah, no, for sure. Um,
Now, I have
any other
one
commanders you
more.
think?
Yeah, we
Lay it
one
on.
more that has to be talked about before we move out of this section. I'm going to be the old man who's complaining again, but Ansrag the Quake Mole is a really interesting 4 mana 8/4. In the discussion of how Massacre Girl was a very fair 4 mana 4/4, Ansrag is 8 power, 4 toughness for 2 in a red and a green. He's a mole god, which I love, and he's got, he's a star-nosed mole, or he's an ugly MF, but he has a really cool art. And whenever he becomes blocked, you untap each creature you control, and after this combat phase, there's an additional combat phase. That ability by itself is really powerful, but he's also tackled on with another ability that's 7 mana. It's 3 colorless, 2 red, and 2 green. That makes Ansrag must be blocked each combat this turn if able. So not only does this like completely halt the game if the opponent has if the effect has been activated and there's like a fog on the field, Ansrag is basically forced to just like attack infinitely until everybody at the table dies of exhaustion. But this is a board wipe every single time it attacks, and it's if a 4 mana 8/4. I mean, come on, talk about power creep. This is just overstated with no sort of downside.
Oh yeah, I mean, the thought here. I know when they were designing this, right? The thought here was like, oh, you're only getting like 4 attacks out of it because you'll max because even if they block with a bunch of 1/1s, you'll slowly chip away its toughness. But that's really not the case because of how easy it is to give something first strike in these colors, or how easy it is to give something indestructible, and then you just go to town. You don't even need to pay that 7 mana, by the way, because guess what? There's a thing in green called Lure, which is a 1 mana force everything to block it. And if you force everything to block it and it has indestructible, then you're just gonna essentially have combat phases until people run out of creatures.
Yeah, and earlier when I mentioned that, like stalling out the game, I forgot. But he also has to be goaded for that scenario to happen. But like you can just see that this turns every single combat into a like if give Ansrag trample or give like an opponent an indestructible creature, and it just makes it's a game over. It's a win con in the command zone, which is like it's fine. And I think there's a lot stronger win cons in the command zone, and this requires like a ton of different pieces. But at its core, I'm not gonna let Ansrag stick around on the battlefield long enough to find out. So I hope you're giving him hexproof. I hope you're giving him shroud. I hope you're using his mole like capabilities with like maybe like a rogue's passage that seems like an appropriate mole card, because otherwise I'm not letting this thing swing.
I kind of like this as a in the 99 card for Wolfgar of Icewind Dale too, because you let Amsrag kind of soak up all of the blockers, and then so Wolfgar is sort of a Ishin Two Heavens as one effect where it doubles triggers for attacking.
Right.
So it's like an attack panharmonic kind of deal. But I like the idea of this just absorbing those and giving you like combat after combat after combat after combat, and you just constantly triggering whatever other creatures.
Oh, yeah, this is huge in multiple combat, decks. This is a big outlet for any sort of, big mana combat based deck that wants to take advantage of that, multiple attack steps.
hmm So yeah, I completely agree. Moving on from commander options, let's talk about some stuff in the 99 because while we all love that big sexy piece of cardboard that we put in that own separate little zone, sometimes we forget that it's really the rest of the deck that is also part of your win con. Now I'm gonna kick it off with one that could technically be a commander, but I don't think it is commander worthy. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think it's a in the commander win. I think it's in the 99 win, and that's Tazak Judas Hellhound. So this comes in with Unleash. So Unleash is you can put a 1/1 counter on it. If you put the 1/1 counter on it, it cannot block. And all your other dogs have Unleash, but whenever it attacks, you add red mana equal to the number of other creatures attacking, and then everything with a counter on it has a haste. Now, I don't foresee the mono red dog deck really popping off. I don't know what that deck looks like. I'll be a little worried about what that deck looks like, but I tell you what deck does operate like this that works really well. It's called Neheb the Eternal. So I can see this kind of operating in that sort of realm where you attack. And if you got some instant speed kind of combat tricks and stuff, they could use a lot of that influx of red mana.
Yeah, it's a Neheb effect with the dog as an extra stapled onto there. Really cool art though, and if you got the secret layer recently, this is a potential auto include for that.
Mhm. What else have we got in here that you think could be a solid in the 99?
Yeah, so yeah, I don't want to get
True
away
banger.
from ramping in red, and I think that crime novelist is probably going to be your strongest card from this set for any sort of like treasure, uh, you know, based deck. The crime novelist is a goblin bard for 3 mana. He's a 1/3, but whenever you sacrifice an artifact, you put a 1/1 counter on crime novelist, and you add 1 red mana. So this dude is a storm, cannon. He's gonna just allow you to pop off on any number of storm turns. He's gonna be great in Prosper. He's going to be great in my numerous treasure decks, and he's probably going to feel a little bit like Bergie when he hits the table and he starts giving you a discount, or like the Urabrask saga that encourages you to cast a ton of cantripy spells and sacrifice the treasures that come from them. Um,
Speaking of like hitting the table, right? You know who I think is the real murderer, right? Because there's all this focus on Cranko and Massacre Girl and all these other, Judith. But if you look at crime novelists, the real murderer is actually in that photo.
hmm.
I don't know if you have it pulled up in front of you right now.
I do. I see.
Take a long look right underneath the desk, and
Is
you can
that
see the murderer hiding out.
Fibblethip of Humunculus fame?
Yeah, see,
It's
he's
awesome.
pretending to be lost, but I think it's not uncoincidental that he's wandering into all these crime scenes.
Hey, knowing that the story has been solved, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but I will either confirm or deny that your theory is or is not correct.
It's both sides of the coin there, huh?
Um,
Um, now this is I think so. There's two cards in this set that I think are going to be the ones that kind of stand the test of time. One of them is Archdruid's Charm. I don't know if
right,
you've seen this one yet. So I think this one 100% looks very flexible in green. So it's green, green, green for an instant. And then you choose one of three options. So option one is search your library for a creature or land card and reveal it. If it's a land, you can put it in the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, you put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. Option two is you get to put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, and then it deals damage equal to its power to another creature. So it's sort of like a fight spell, except you don't get the return damage. Or you can exile target artifact or enchantment. So it's if you like counters, you got the counter aspect. If you need removal, you got that. If you want a tutor, you have that option.
if you need ramp, you have that option too. It's super
Yeah, if you
versatile.
need ramp, you have that option.
It's in like a larger cycle of cards. It's the first of to continue the cycle, which was a blue Archmage's Charm from I think like
Mhm.
several years ago. It was a pretty cool little like 3 blue mana instant that did a similar modal effect. But I think that this is a really versatile card. But with that 3 green pips, you better be running this in like max probably a 2 color deck.
Yeah. Now, well, let me hear what you think about this. In mono green, like, hey, where you're not going to worry about having those three straight green pips. Is this a staple? Like, do you think this is borderline staple or no?
So yeah, I mean, in green, if you need artifact or enchantment removal, you have like some like nature's claim, that sort of thing. Where you're gonna have like a little. This is a little bit expensive for a single target removal piece, but the versatility of this being able to potentially grab you any land. It's not just like a basic land ramp. Like this grabs you your Rogue's Passage if you need that, to kill with combat, or this grabs like your Maze of Ith or Glacial Chasm. I think this is, I would argue, that's a great point. Like it could be a mono green staple coming out of this set because you
Yeah, I
need
mean,
the tutor like it's versatile.
yeah, and I mean, I completely agree with you that I'm not running it outside of two colors. Like if I get to a three, four, or five color deck, it's nowhere on the radar. But I think if you go mono green and you care remotely about counters, even, I mean, it gives you the counter option, it gives you the tutor option, and it gives you some removal if you're in a tight jam and you don't have your nature's claims or your return to nature, or I mean, it's at least on par with like a beast within, I guess.
Well, to some extent, but Beast Within gets any permanent, so it's not getting your lands, it's not getting your planeswalkers. But if you have a strong enough creature, it'll take care of a creature too, which is cool. And I think that level of versatility enough is like it gives it some chops.
hmm
Yeah.
the other one I think we're gonna see is like a go-to staple in not in every deck, but in Commander. Doorkeeper Thrall, I think, is going to be a nice stacks piece that you'll see pop up more often than not.
Yeah.
So that's a one and a white, has flash, flying, and then artifacts and creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. Um, I mean, I could see that popping up. That
He's a
with like Magistrate.
yeah, better Torpor Orb. I mean, and he's
hmm
flying. He's a good, great blocker as well. So
Yeah, so I mean, having him pop up in just the fact that he's a 1/2 means he can chump block any 1/1s. So I could see those two. If I had to like guess, in advance, the two cards that are most likely to kind of gain traction going forward, I think those would be my two picks.
Well, okay, so I love those choices, but I do have a couple
Sure.
of other under. I mean, I wouldn't say undersold. I think these were hyped up, and so I'm not like revealing any new information here. But I also do have a
Yeah, yeah,
couple
yeah.
that are kind of like under the rug. But okay, so first off, we got Doppelgang, which is XXX in a green blue. It's a sorcery. You for each of X target permanents, you create X tokens that are copies of that permanent. So if you have X of 3 and you, for instance, grab like a Gray Merchant of Asphodel, a Necropotence, and like you're ending the game right there with a somebody else's board because you can target any permanents. You can make copies of lands. You can make copies of your Cabal coffers or something crazy. I'm thinking with a lot of like Soul Tie stuff here, but the applications are pretty much infinite. ETBs are you know, killer. So I think Doppelgang
Mhm.
really strong. Any
Yeah,
thoughts?
no, no, I agree. I know there was also a lot of hype kind of going in towards Leyline of the Guild Pack, which is the 4 mana, all hybrid mana kind of enchantment.
All hybrid
Um,
green. It's
yeah, all
four green
hybrid
devotion.
green.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about it being four because it's talking about 5 colors. It has to do with 5 colors, so it's like, where's my fifth pip? I guess.
Yeah.
But it comes with that leyline text of like, it enters the battlefield if it's in your opening hand. And each non-land permanent you control is all colors, and lands you control are every basic land type in addition to other lands. So it makes if you're in a 5 color deck, I think this kind of becomes a staple as well.
I
Just from
so
the
disagree.
you don't think so?
I'm well here. Yeah. Give you your reasoning. I'm sorry.
All right, here's the reasoning, right? 2024 is the year that Coalition Victory becomes unbanned, and then I just right there,
That's
turn 5.
that's a great point. Maybe invest in this card for the future. But my thought is that like I feel like Chromatic Lantern doesn't hardly even sees play now. Like maybe in a
Mhm.
budget 5 color deck, this will be good. But if you're having to play this as a 4 mana spell, I feel like this just feels bad. Unless you get it in the opening hand and you get it on the field, it's like I'm not really looking to play this. I'm looking to mana fix through other means in a 5 color deck.
Yeah, the only problem with that is I never get any of these ley lines in my opening hand. Any ley line I've ever played, I never pull them in my opening hand.
Yeah, I can't wait until there's a leyline commander that is like start the game with any number of leyline, or if leyline is commander is your in your command zone at the beginning of the game, you could start the game with any number of ley lines on the battlefield. Start the game with like line them up.
Sure, sure.
So okay, I have a couple of other. I have one other really cool card, and then I have some kind of smaller ones. But
Sure.
out of Murders of Karlov Manor, I really like Krinko's Buzz Crusher, which is 2
Okay.
colorless and 2 red for an insect thopter artifact creature. He's a 4/4 with flample that's flying and trample for the unenfranchised. And when he ETBs, for each player, you can destroy up to 1 non basic land that player controls. And each land destroyed that way, the controller can search for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tapped instead. I'm a huge proponent of land destruction because I think lands are really OP, to be honest with you. And
Mhm.
Krinko's Buzz Crusher deals with like 4 potential problem lands all at once. At the worst case, it's a 4/4 flying trampler. But I think at the best case, you see like a shocking amount of relevant lands in an EDH game, even if you're not like thinking about it, like the new discover lands from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, or the like we were talking about the clue rooms that allow you to investigate, like even or destroying somebody's bounce land that they've spent 3 turns playing a Boros garrison or something. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of potential for this to get value off the cast.
Yeah, I like that. I also in the same mono red flample theme. You're a connoisseur of the mono red dragon deck. with Lathless at the helm.
That's
Am I correct?
that's absolutely correct.
So I would like your opinion also on Incinerator of the Guilty. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a 6 mana 6/6 with Flample. And when it deals combat damage to a player, it gives you sort of a steel Hellkite kind of effect. So you can collect evidence X, and when you do, it deals that much damage to each creature and planeswalker that player controls.
That's pretty cool. And it's a dragon?
Yeah, it's a 6/6 Flamplin Dragon.
I mean, that seems pretty relevant. Everybody loves a good steel Hellkite. Everybody loves being on the opposite side of the, you don't want to be on the side that's taking the combat damage from the steel Hellkite. But the collecting evidence is like it's gonna be more relevant in a deck that pumps stuff into the graveyard. But I don't know if it's gonna see play in my mono red dragon deck, but I like the idea of it.
It's almost like in a way though that it's better than Steel Hellkite in a specific sense of like Steel Hellkite is going to hit things that have the same mana value as what you're pumping in,
Uh-huh.
whereas this one is dealing damage, so it's going to hit everything below X. So it's almost like a Balefire Dragon with on a Steel Hellkite.
Yeah, but here's my deal. Like, if you don't have anything in your graveyard, this is a way
Sure.
worse Steel Hellkite. Like, at least Steel Hellkite gets you something, provided you have the mana for it.
No, no, this one definitely has some hoops to jump through, but I do think it's worth just pointing out as like an interesting card that exists as an option. Other one I think we should talk about too is the new cycle of lands.
Sure.
So we have a new cycle of fetchable dual lands. Fetchable in that they have the basic land types of mountain, forest, plains, islands, and swamp. These do come in tapped, which is a little bit of a downside over your shock lands, your OG dual lands, stuff like that. But when at the end of the battlefield, you get to surveil, which I'm gonna argue already puts them above your temples and your scry lands and all that kind of stuff. Your scry lands, your gain one life land.
Yeah, well, they're fetchable, and they each have
Mhm.
the land types, so they're going to be found off of any sort of your nature's lore, things like that are searching for subtypes of a basic land. Um, and then not to mention with the collect evidence synergy or any deck that cares about retrieving things from the graveyard or like putting things in the graveyard, surveil is a blatantly better scry, but otherwise they're pretty similar. But I like it a lot, and I definitely will be replacing the majority of my temples that are in my decks with this land cycle.
Yeah, I think they upgrade on the temples. Also, I've in two color decks, I've played some things like Arctic Tree Line and stuff like that before, where it's a dual land that comes in tapped, and really the only reason you play it is because it's fetchable.
Yeah.
But I might as well upgrade it for something that is a dual land that comes in tapped, is fetchable, and then also gives me the option to surveil. Because worst case scenario, I look at the top card of my library, I don't throw it in the graveyard, and at least I know what it is, or maybe I want to scry it away with another effect or something like that.
Right.
But having that added piece of knowledge helps. Um, Only other card I think I wanted to bring up, and then I'll gladly pass the floor over to you, is Escape Tunnel. So you and I were talking about this before we hit record, but Escape Tunnel is also a slight upgrade on some lands that exist. So Escape Tunnel is tap, sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land card, put it in the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. AKA Terramorphic Expanse and Wild or Evolving Wilds. But this one also lets you tap, sacrifice it, and target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. So it's like Access Tunnel meets Evolving Wilds.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me personally, I think that this is, I mean, I'm not going to take credit for, I think we both agree that it's a better version of Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse because of the
Sure.
modal capability of it to give that unblockable. But the fact that it's a power two or less creature, you can give it to anybody so you can make somebody else's creature unblockable, but unless you're playing a deck that cares about dealing combat damage with a shrimpy creature, I'm like, I don't really see this being, the craziest card in the world. It's strong because it's a better Evolving Wilds if you get it late game, but regardless, late game, I hope that 2 damage is now, put this in the whole clay, the pride of the Horror Clade or whatever, and you're popping off. But otherwise, it's all right.
Yeah,
It's there.
I mean, I'm not looking at it like, hey, this is the card that's gonna just revamp your entire commander deck, right? Like, oh, I swapped out Evolving Wilds for this card, and now my deck went from clunky garbage to the ultimate, in optimization.
Right.
But I do think that any upgrade is an upgrade. So, for example, like in my Hello deck, it cares about casualty two, so a lot of stuff has to be 2/2. It doesn't mean I'm not running Kinzen Crucible of Fire or whatever in there over a mountain, because guess what? Maybe once in a blue moon I need a blocker, and I can get my two little 1/1 spirits out of it.
Yeah, so do me a favor, keep track this year, and any listeners, you can follow along at home. Keep track this year of the number of times you deal 2 damage, or you use that secondary effect of escape tunnel, and if it has been relevant. And in 2025, January 1st, 2025, I will send you a custom token. I will draw a picture and send it to you. If you have a crazy enough play and proof, I need everybody to sign that, the witnesses. I need witness statements. I think that this card, my point is, I don't think this card's going to be that crazy, but if it is, I'll be impressed.
Well, the problem is you threw out the example of how to best use it, which is Pride of Hellclade, but you didn't realize that you actually can't use it in Pride of Hellclade because the second you activate its ability to get rid of the defender, it gains +1, so it becomes a 3/15.
You would have to does it have defender to begin with? Because the idea here, oh, it
Yeah, it has
does.
defender to begin with.
So it would have to be able to
Use
attack.
defender.
Yeah, or you know what? Maybe it has a neg one counter on it from
Sure, sure.
Massacre Girl. Bam, bam, problem solved.
I think you run this in Delny, where everything is 2 power or less.
There you go.
Um, but there we go. Do you have any other add-ons for us in this category, Cole? Any other best of the 99?
Well, yeah, I'll go ahead and leave you with the honorable mention of, I think, Demand Answers is really relevant. It's one in a red for an instant that allows you to draw 2 cards at the additional cost of sacrificing an artifact or discarding a card. I'm only mentioning this because it's a common, and it's actually absolutely perfect for my Lara Croft deck that cares about pumping out artifacts and then being able to sacrifice them, get them into the graveyard, and then bring them back. It's an instant, so this is just some really good red card advantage with like a bit of a different cost. Like usually all these class of discard, are spells that care about discarding, whereas this one allows you to sacrifice. So I think it's a step in the right direction without being like too much of a power creep. And it's a common. I think it's relevant. Uh, Play it. That's it.
Play it,
Yeah.
play it, leave it, do it now.
Yeah.
All right. So there you guys have it. Best of the 99, best commander options, best precons, and worst precon. And now we're gonna do something a little different. So we have not done this before in any of our set previews, but I wanted to challenge you, Cole, going into 2024. So we're each gonna pick our lock in 100%. This commander is gonna be slotted into our rotation from this set. Now, what I want to do is between now and the next set, when we get to the next set, we're going to see, did you actually build the deck? You know, love it, hate it. Did you build it and tear it down? Did you never build it? You know, we can kind of track to see how excited we are as the set comes out, and if maybe that excitement wanes. And the reason I want to do this is because if we look back at 2023, the commanders from 2023 that you and I built that we got the most like excitement and enjoyment out of were ones I don't think we predicted going into the set. Like I did not predict, hey, Cole is gonna build Gandalf and it's gonna be one of his favorite decks coming through the year.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So
So
the first
go for it.
impression
Cole. What is
versus
your
like what ends up actually happening.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Yeah, so I had a couple of different options for this, but the one that I settled on was Voja, the Jaws of the Conclave. It's two in the Naya for a legendary wolf with vigilance, trample, ward three. Auga, auga. And whenever Voja, Jaws of the Conclave attacks, you put X 1/1 counters on each creature you control, where X is the number of elves you control, and then you draw a card for each wolf you control. He's a 5/5, and that's a lot of text to basically say, um, if the more elves you have, the stronger your field is going to get. The more wolves you have, the more cards you're going to draw. So I think this is a very versatile commander because you could build it all elves, you could do all wolves, you could do kind of a combo of the two. Yeah, I'm a fan of anything with vigilance and trample. I've loved dealing some good old fashioned commander damage, and Ward 3 is super strong. I want to use this as a deck that cares about the ramping elves, any of my mana dorks and Farhaven elves, that sort of thing, to get me into my cool, more flavorful wolves, and then overrun the board with a howling army um, with 1/1 counters. So I think you might be seeing this one in the next couple weeks from me.
Okay. I like that. So I we already kind of talked about the one I went for, right? Because we had to, and it'll make sense here in a second. But I want to say you also kind of scooped me because Vojo was my lock in, and then when you picked Vojo, I was like, all right, let me pivot because there were a couple options out there, right? So I like Voja. I think it's super flavorful. It looks like a fun commander. I mean, Ward 3 is no joke because there's Ward
Honestly.
on Miram, and it's like, well, way to make a busted commander more busted, right? I also am a big fan of Massacre Girl, so that one is also hovering around my radar. But the one I went with, maybe we talked about it already, is Sophia, Dogged Detective. So we talked about it a little bit in the precon, so I'm not going to delve into it too much more, but I like it. You know, you're out there talking about big wolves. I'm going to be out here making big dogs, which are wolf esque. So clues, food, counters, the works. So this is also one I think might be popping up in the rotation pretty soon. When I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, it does everything. Everything I want out of it."
Yeah, I told you, so Erica, who's been on the podcast a couple times before, when she first got into Magic, her first thought was like, how can I make a Scooby Doo commander? And when we saw this, it was just like, oh, that is the perfect rendition of Shaggy and Scooby, and you got enough colors in there that I'm sure you can find the rest of the gang. And when the secret
Mhm.
layer comes out, mark my words, it's just going to be a full stop. Pop a mystery machine based vehicle in there and go to town.
Mhm.
So I think that's a great choice. I'm excited to see this deck. I think it's really cute, and I like Tiny. The tokens
Yeah,
are
I
cute.
think I think it's going to be a fun deck. It does like basically everything I want. Voja also does everything I want, so it's sort of I think we'll both have a blast with these two. So when we get to Outlaws of Thunder Junction, I guess would be the next one. When we get to Outlaws of Thunder Junction, we're gonna have to check back in and see if we built this or not, or if we, interest waned as time went on.
Yeah. Well, let's place our bets now. So, I'll bet that by the time Thunder Junction comes out, at the very least, Sophia, the she's in our play group. If it's you playing it or Erica playing it.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. If it's not me, because Sharon also had eyes on Sophia, so there could be a day where you're running Voja, and then there's three Sophias, all doggedly detective, investigating you.
Right.
um, but guys, so that wraps up our review, third word that rhymes with those. A look at Murders at Karlov Manor. So we're gonna hop into our question of the week, card of the week, and then we're gonna go ahead and wrap up today's episode. So Cole, question of the week. This week it's coming out from Tristan. So thank you, Tristan, for submitting a question of the week. And Tristan's question is: with Murders of Karlov Manor being set in Ravnica, but not within all of Ravnica, is there any other planes you would like to revisit in the future?
Oh, well, that's a really great question, and thanks for reaching out and engaging with the podcast. I'm a sucker for the sentimental aspect of the game, and so anytime we look at like kind of going back to the Tarkir plane, I get really excited because that's kind of when I first started playing. Right around then, anything like that, Theros. Vibes, Tarkir vibes. Put me back. I know we've been back to Theros semi recently, but I love Greek mythology and the cards. I'm a sucker for the any sort of Theros gods. So maybe I changed my answer from Tarkir to let's double down on Theros.
Like your answer. Yeah, I really love Tarkir, but maybe Theros. Um, no, what's funny? I like Theros too because of the whole Greek mythology aspect to it. Even though I don't play a lot of Theros decks, like I don't have a Perforos or any of those kind of decks, but conceptually I really enjoy it. Um, for me, I'm gonna say that the two sets that I would, or the two planes I would be most excited to revisit, ironically, are already on the docket to be revisited. So for me, Strixhaven really jumps out
Nice.
because when I first started, it was Ikoria. So when I got into Commander, it was Ikoria. But the first set that I really kind of like invested in, as far as oh wow, look at these cool new cards and look at the decks I could get and stuff like that, it was Strixhaven. So the fact that we're going back to it, that's exciting for me. I'm looking forward to new Brina, so I can be even more shady at the table. And then also Lorwyn. So I didn't really play during the Lorwyn Shadowmoor time, but there's so many cards from that set that I really, really enjoy. So I am looking forward to kind of revisiting Lorwyn, uh, more actively involved this time.
Sure.
But I don't know that there's a plane I would outright be like, I never want to revisit. But those would probably be my top ones. Strixhaven, which is Arcavios, I believe the name of the plane is, and then Lorwyn.
Well, and so okay, I'll give. I would like to give one more answer. If we're talking about planes that have not been revisited or like yet, I would like
Uh-huh.
similarly to Strixhaven. I would think like Kaldheim or something like that would be fun as well. Like I think we have
Mhm.
some really fun sets recently, as fun as the older sets were. Like Strixhaven is super unique, and the idea of like a wizarding school added a lot of ton of fun to Magic. And then like Kaldheim with kind of that like Norse mythology, yeah, I love anytime we're able to kind of engage in cultures and that sort of thing with Magic.
Mhm. No, I completely agree. I mean, so let me ask you this: so if we revisited those, just to give a little more invested of an answer, I guess. If we revisited those, would you look for a straight one-to-one revisit? Like, hey, it's Kaldheim just as I left it, or would you want something like Kamigawa where you're revisiting the plane, but changes have happened, like we're so many years in the future or in the past or parallel dimension or alternate dimension of the same plane.
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly with Kaldheim, you could go back and do some, pre Norse, like before there was anything. There were the ice giants or whatever. Like you could do some really cool stuff, kind of
Mhm.
going back in time. The few going forward in time would be like, oh, Switzerland, the set. So
Well,
I,
no, no. I
which would
asked
be
because
awesome, which
like
would be super cool. Don't quote me on that.
I wasn't around. I wasn't around for Tarkir,
Uh huh.
but I mean, wasn't there a Tarkir where the dragons existed and a Tarkir where the dragons went extinct? Like a
Right.
con set and a dragon set. So, I mean, I could see something like that too. Like, hey, this is like let's take Theros, right? This is Theros with the Greek gods, and this is Theros where the Titans won out.
Right. Well, hey, if they put in those titans like Uro and Croxa and all that, that could be a central theme of the next Theros set. So
Mhm.
we called it now. If it ends up happening in 2028.
There we go. All right. So thank you again, Tristan. If you guys want to submit question of the week, we're always open to receiving them. So, and also, hey, let us know down below what do you guys want to revisit. So, I know a lot of people gripe about revisiting Ravnica and Dominaria so
Been there,
much.
done that.
So, what would you like to go back to? But that's question of the week. Cole, what do we got lined up for card of the week?
Yeah, so the card of the week, everybody's buzzing about it. It's a really cool common from this set that I think is going to be bought out in droves because you can have any number of this card in your deck. It's Slime Against Humanity, which is 1 green and 2 colorless for a sorcery that creates a 0/0 green ooze creature token with trample and puts X 1/1 counters on it, where X is 2 plus the total number of cards you own in exile or in your graveyard that are oozes or are named Slime Against Humanity. So basically, this is Relentless Rats, but in green. It's stronger than Relentless Rats because it's not vulnerable to graveyard hate. If you get Bajuka Bogged, your slimes are still coming out stronger. It loves copy effects. It wants you to copy and cast as many slime against humanities as you can to create an unstoppable trampling army of slimes. I love this card, and I think it's going to be super fun. Addition to the Relentless Rats, Persistent Petitioners, Dragons approach, that subcategory of cards that break the singleton rule.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was actually when you were listening off, or before you started listening them off, I was thinking, okay, so persistent petitioners, relentless rats, dragons approach, slime against humanity. Now that means blue needs to get one sometime soon.
Well, the Persistent Petitioners is blue.
No, no.
Other than
Wait, then which one's the odd one out? White? Is
whites,
white the odd? Hmm.
yeah, I don't think white has one.
White needs like a seven dwarves kind of. You just can only have seven of them.
No, white would be like pay 10 mana, gain 2 life, and then plus X, where X is the number of cards, named. So it'd be just a really bad life gain spell is the joke. Everybody, hates on white. But,
And
yeah,
also would exile something.
sure.
All right. No. I also like. I think it's a fun card. I do like the fact that it comes out with trample on it. So that could be a interesting little aspect to it. Also, S tier pun, by the way. Uh, but that's card of the week. That was question of the week. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. So thank you guys for listening. If you want to reach out to Cole on any of the social medias, you can find him at at
Whoa.
loveandmana.mtg. You can reach out to him where he does fun photo shoots on Instagram, X-rated photo shoots on X.com.
This is absolute
Uh,
slander.
you can reach out to me at SleeveCard on all those same places. I don't do photo shoots, but with the right convincing, I could. Or you can reach out to the podcast directly at UrCastPod or contact.urcast@gmail.com. That's also where you can submit any of your question of the weeks. Card of the week, if you want to recommend anything like that, you can hit those thumbs up. You can hit that like button, subscribe button, all that good stuff. It all does pay out in the long run because Cole likes to keep his lights on and food in his refrigerator. But thank you for making it to the end of the episode. Have yourselves a magical Friday, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.